Alright, hello and welcome back to my real-time strategy in Unity tutorial. Today we are going to be making some preparations for implementing the AI in the game. So basically there's not much visibly that we can see from the demonstration, but I'm just going to show you anyway. So one thing I did implement was a spawning of workers in the world and a resource store which basically contains a reference to every resource in the game. So if you can see, look down here, you'll see that we've got a massive list of trees, and then there'll be less stone and iron and whatnot. See in that corner there. And if we go over to the scene, don't have all that selected. So zoom in a minute. Let's see if we can see one of them. Yeah, there we go. So we've got a selection group of workers here, but if we click on them, they have got a faction identifier. This is basically a way I've got of discriminating which unit belongs to which faction. So as you can see, this faction these belong to faction 1. So if I just Google, I think faction controller is actually at the top. Yep. So we've got faction controller, which has a list of factions in the game and a number of factions to create at the start. And if we just go on to here, we've got a faction controller game object, which contains basically a reference to the faction. So, and these have an identifier, which basically is just a reference to who they are, so they can tell the difference between units. A unit store, which basically will store all their units. A building store, which, funnily enough, stores all their buildings. And a resource store, which stores all their resources. So yeah. And the player does not have one of these because they have all the different versions. So they have their unit manager, building store, resource store, whatever. So yeah, let's go see how this was implemented. Okay, so the basic idea behind what I've done for this episode is that we need a way for the AI to reference objects in the game that the user would normally be able to tell visually, and access through mouse clicks. So I'll just quickly demonstrate this. So it'll just take a minute. Well, not even a minute, but whatever. So basically, since if you were playing the RTS, you'd be able to click on these units and say, all right, go to there. All right, go to there. Whatever. But the AI can't do that because it can't see the thing. It just has lists of numbers and references and whatever. So we need a way for references to everything that the AI could need to be stored, and then have it access them in a way that it would give them useful information. Say, all right, what's the nearest resource of X type? Where do we have any free units that we could use to accomplish some task? Things of that nature. And so that is basically the purpose. So first off, I'm actually going to show you the faction controller first. So basically, a static reference like normal, list of factions in the game, this faction class I made, number of factions that you want to create in the game, and the fucking trains come past. Okay. And brief up. Another fucking train. Next. And another worker, a game object worker, just so we have a prefab to spawn them. Okay, so this is just initializing the stuff. This initializes them when the grid has been generated, so once we have the world built, it'll spawn all the factions and whatnot. This was done because of how basically the grid, load grid, where it'll generate a texture of Perlin noise and create the map from that, only is called in the start. And if we were to have this called once in the start, it might not. It might execute before the world is generated, so that would cause an error. So that is why we have it's here with a check, and it's checked every time. That's probably a bad way to do it, but it works. So I'm going to leave it for now and maybe come back to it. For initialized factions, we basically go for from x equals 0 to the number of factions we want to have. We create a new child game object, which is just blank, so we can add the components as we want, and we have a reference to it under G. Basically, we add faction and call the initialize method on faction, and then add that faction to the list of factions in the game. So what is faction? Faction basically contains references to a faction's units, buildings, resources, and its identifier. And it also has a spawn location. So under initialize, we basically just add all these components to the game object, which was created here. And then we get just assigned the stores to, so we just use this.gameObject.getComponent, blah, blah, blah. And then we create the starting workers. Then, so we get a workable position, which basically isn't the best way to do it, but what we do is we just choose a random X and Y coordinate that's 10 tiles from the edge of the world. And what we do is, if it's workable, we return that. Otherwise, we just get another one. Because I know, hypothetically, on a really long string of odds, this could crash the game. But it's like, you probably got a better chance of winning the Euro Millions or something than it actually crashing. Because there's a lot more workable tiles than there are unworkable tiles. So, you should be fine there. What else? Right. Yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So yeah, this basically just gets a walkable tile in the world and sets that, alright, we're going to start this faction there. So what we do is we spawn the units and add a random offset of about a meter or 1 unity unit, because we want to basically, so all the 5 workers don't appear on top of each other. That'd be bad. And then we have the minus 2.0 as the z-axis, because that's the unit z. And then we just instantiate it and store it as a work. Store it under G temporarily, because we need to add the faction identifier, so we know that it's part of this faction and stuff. And we set the f.myFaction equals this, because if we look at faction identifier, basically all it is a faction for the faction that the whatever it's attached to is part of, and then we have a comparison method which returns a boolean. So basically we pass in a faction to compare. So if to AI, so if it's null, so since the player doesn't have one, it would be passing in this, passing null. So we say, all right, this unit that we found is not part of our faction, so say we could attack it or whatever. And again, we can do this. So if a similar thing. So if we do actually pass in a faction, if it's the same, then we return true. So it's part of our faction. We don't want to attack it or whatever, or we want to protect it, and so on. And else we return false, saying, all right, it's not part of our faction. Again, we can attack it. Or do whatever you want your AI to do. Go back to faction. Yeah, so that'll basically initialize all the 5 workers for that. Now, building store. This is, no, that's not the AI one. AI unit store. Again, this is just public lists that we add to as we create units. As the AI gets developed, we will use this more, but I'm just showing it now. I just thought I'd have it set up now, just so we can start with the whole faction development bit. Because we're going to need it at some point, so we might as well make it now, just so you know it's there. Again, with the AI building store, we just got list of buildings, we initialize it, we're not using it yet, so we got a couple of steps we need to do before we actually create this building, because we're going to need to work out, like, can we find an area where there's sufficient size for the buildings without using the mouse cursor, like the AI would need to do. So that's a problem we'll have to solve in a future episode. Forest tiles. Oh yeah, I should probably go to the resource store first. Okay, so faction identifier, faction controller, faction, done that one. This one. Alright, basically. It's basically a list. It has lists of all the resources stored in the game. So, like I showed you before, it just has a list of game objects, and it has an acceptable distance. This is basically just what is the closest distance to a position that we would consider, okay, this resource is valid. So say if we wanted a worker to go find food, we'd go through the list and say, all right, if this one is less than 10, less than the acceptable distance, then we'll return that, because 10 isn't that far. So right, that's fine, and we'll not search through the rest of them because we'll consider that near enough. And yeah, but just in case there aren't any that are within 10, we also go through all of them and we return the nearest one. So even if it is more than 10, if that makes sense. So basically what this does, it just gets the game object. It gets the nearest of a type of resource based on a position that is passed in. And if that distance is less than 10, but it's not reached the end of the list, it will just return that, because we'll consider that near enough. And hopefully that will save some kind of performance, because we're not having to go through the entire list. And again, we have doppelgangers of these methods for wood, stone, gold, and iron. So yeah, and we do have a couple of changes for... Did I change? Yes, on action attack unit, we use the check for, is this a valid target? So basically, for the target we pass in, if the game object doesn't have a faction identifier, it's saying, all right, we're a player unit, and G and the so if this unit doesn't have a faction identifier, then it is a player unit that's trying to attack something. If the unit does have a faction identifier, then it is an enemy unit. So yes, it is a valid attack, so we can return true. But if it doesn't, then you're just trying to attack another player unit, so we return false. And otherwise, if G.getComponent, so if it does have a faction identifier on it, the attacking game object, so that'd say, all right, it's an AI trying to attack someone. Then if the if the other game object's faction identifier is not equal to this game object's faction identifier, so basically we just want to make sure that the faction identifier on this object and the one on the object we're trying to attack for the AI is not the same, then we return true, so that's valid, otherwise we return false. Hopefully that made sense. We're just basically trying to differentiate when we're attacking if a unit is of the same faction or not. So like we're going to attack, and we've done a similar process in the thing. So for the GUI manager, basically this is deciding whether the player, or mess yeah, basically if the player's mouse is hovering over a enemy unit, it will check for if this hit object has a faction identifier, and if the unit does have one, then it will display the little spear cursor to say that we can attack. Otherwise, we can't. And if I just show you there, I will just quickly I'll just quickly show you that. Maximize. So if I click the hoplite here, you'll see that we can't attack these our own archers or workers anymore. But if I pause this quickly, still got the hoplite selected, camera, and I just have to find enemy units quickly. All right, so here are some enemy units, but you can see that we can now attack them. And we'd sent that hoplite to go to there, so if I'm correct, he should be moving, but he's not. Oh well. Yeah, so alright, he's moving. And if I right click there, he should be moving along the way. And once he gets there, he will kill the worker. Hmm. Ow. Got a cramp in my foot. It's not fun. And you can see, if we can do it to the other ones as well, it's sufficient enough to attack and move away and whatnot. Yeah. So that was pretty much it for the preparations for the AI. Next week, at some point, we will start implementing methods for the AI to find areas, to place buildings and whatnot. And we'll have to do some work on the ways to make the AI be able to build units and whatnot and give them orders and such, because we can't use the building actions for the normal for the players ones, because they don't have a reference to the unit they create, because the player can just click them. So we have to write it'd be pretty much identical, but we have to have a reference, so it'll add it to the unit list and add the faction identifier. So yeah, that was the AI preparations for my RTS. Cheers for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that shit. If I've updated Loud or Quiet for new menus and a couple of new weapons. I did some physics-based stuff, so go check that out. The link will be in the description. Again, all the assets that I've done in previous tutorials are available on my itch.io page. Yeah, Omega Station's still a thing. There may be some disruption to the whole one video a week routine, because I am in my final year at uni and I've got exams coming up. So I think the last exam is May 17th, so just under a month, and then maybe I can put out more videos. Well, I'm trying to go ham on the Loud or Quiet development to make sure that it's actually finished by the end of the year. So yeah, cheers for watching. Bye.